At the beginning of the project, why was the role and ownership not clear? At the start, many teams were involved: backend, AI, CS tooling, data, and operations. Each team was strong in its own domain, but there was no clear owner for overall delivery. When dependencies were late or risks appeared, teams focused on their own scope, and no one owned the full picture. So what did you do when you realized this problem? I realized that without a clear delivery owner, the project could slowly go off track. So I stepped in and took responsibility at the program level, focusing on delivery goals, phases, dependencies, and major risks. How did you define the boundary of your responsibility? I was very clear about my role. I did not write code, decide feature details, or replace technical leads. My responsibility was to make sure teams worked together, risks were visible early, and delivery decisions were made at the right time. How did you handle ownership when problems appeared? When backend and AI work had many unknowns, problems could not be solved by one team alone. Instead of asking only about timelines, I focused on impact and dependencies. I gathered information from different teams and raised issues with clear options and risks. I didn't solve technical problems, but I made sure they were not ignored or delayed. How would you summarize your role in this project? My role was not to make everything perfect. It was to keep delivery stable under pressure, keep clarity when things became unclear, and help the organization make controlled decisions. How did you approach delivery for this customer support project? I did not focus on speed at the beginning. This was a complex system with many unknowns, so my first focus was clarity, clear delivery goals, clear phases, and key dependencies between teams. Why did you choose phased delivery instead of a big bang release? Some stakeholders wanted a full solution in one release, but I felt that was risky. With this scale, a big bang release had high risk, so I proposed phased delivery. First, core workflows and basic operations, then automation and AI improvements later. What happened when the original plan stopped working? Backend and AI work had many unknowns, and the original timeline was no longer reliable. Instead of pushing the old plan, I changed how we tracked delivery. I used technical checkpoints and real progress indicators to keep delivery predictable. How would you describe your delivery mindset? I prefer clarity over speed and predictability over perfect plans. This helps large projects stay stable under pressure. What made this project complex? Many teams were involved, and each owned a different part of the same workflow. Backend, AI, CS tools, and operations were tightly connected. A change in one team could impact many others. What was the real challenge at scale? Looking at teams individually was not enough. One late dependency could block many teams, creating chain effects. Without visibility, teams stayed busy, but progress slowed. How did you handle scale and dependencies? I didn't manage every task. I focused on dependencies between teams and created a simple dependency map. This helped teams understand who they depended on and helped stakeholders see risks early. How do you think about scale? Scale is not about control, it's about making complexity visible. When dependencies are clear, delivery becomes more predictable. What was the biggest risk in this project? Uncertainty. Backend and AI work had many unknowns, and some items couldn't be estimated accurately at the start. What did you do when the original plan became unreliable? I changed how we tracked delivery. Instead of focusing only on timelines, I focused on what was clear and what was still unknown, using technical checkpoints and real progress signals. How did you communicate risks? I was open with stakeholders. I shared what was stable, what was risky, and what options we had. I didn't hide uncertainty, which helped stakeholders make informed decisions. How do you define good risk management? It's not about removing all risks, it's about making risks visible and controllable. When uncertainty is high, predictability matters more than fixed promises. When did you have to make trade-offs? We couldn't have everything at the same time. We had to balance scope, timeline, and release safety, while stakeholders had different priorities. What was your role in those decisions? I made trade-offs explicit. I usually presented 2 or 3 options, showing scope impact, timeline impact, and risk. I didn't decide for stakeholders, but I ensured decisions were made with full awareness. Can you give one example? We limited scope in the first phase and delayed some AI automation features. We focused on stable core workflows, which reduced release risk and allowed us to scale later.
When did you have to make trade-offs? We couldn't have everything at the same time. We had to balance scope, timeline, and release safety, while stakeholders had different priorities. What was your role in those decisions? I made trade-offs explicit. I usually presented 2 or 3 options, showing scope impact, timeline impact, and risk. I didn't decide for stakeholders, but I ensured decisions were made with full awareness. Can you give one example? We limited scope in the first phase and delayed some AI automation features. We focused on stable core workflows, which reduced release risk and allowed us to scale later. What kind of conflicts did you face? Tech teams worried about system safety, CS operations worried about daily operations, and business teams were under strong timeline pressure. How did you handle those conflicts? I didn't try to please everyone. I brought discussions back to shared criteria like acceptable risk, stability, and release conditions. What was the outcome? We agreed on a conditional go-live with limited scope, fallback plans, and increased hypercare. Trust between teams was maintained. What was the most sensitive phase of the project? Around month 7 or 8, during release, the system worked but wasn't perfect and pressure was high. How did you approach go-live? I treated go-live as a conditional decision. We discussed readiness criteria, risks, and conditions instead of a simple yes or no. How did you handle pressure after release? I focused on clear communication, one channel, clear priorities, and no panic. What does a successful release mean to you? Not 0 issues, but controlled issues, clear response, and a system that works in real operations. What were the results after stabilization? The system became stable. CS agents handled more tickets with less manual work, and response time and quality improved. Any long-term impact? The system scaled well to new products and regions without proportional headcount growth. Delivery also became more predictable. What was your biggest learning? Large-scale delivery rarely fails because of technology. It fails because of unclear ownership and late decisions. How did this project change you? I learned that doing more isn't always better. In uncertainty, clarity and simplicity matter more than strict plans. How do you see your role today? I focus on keeping deliveries stable under pressure, supporting clear decisions, and helping teams work sustainably.